Welcome back to the Write Effing Now podcast. I'm your host, Hilary Jastram, coming at you with episode number 4 already. Isn't that crazy? And I'll say this episode number 4 is in a lineup of episodes that have already been recorded, but episode number 4 of video, if we're getting specific. Today, we're going to talk about different kinds of editing, and it is a refresh. It's something that people like to talk about. And I think in large part because they really don't understand that there are different kinds of editing or what even the editing services entail. So, want to dive into that today, talk about the different editing tiers, the process, using online and offline programs and things of that nature. So, we'll start with the editing tiers. So there are different editing tiers, and you may have encountered this prior. If you are an editor yourself, or you're trying to learn how to edit, or you're an author, you may have an editor come to you and tell you, okay, well, tell me about your work and what all needs to be done and everything like that. And you might hear back something like, I just want proofing. Okay, so proofing is what I typically call P&G, which is punctuation and grammar. And it can overlap a little bit into, well, let's just say if you're a little OCD, you're gonna point out other things in the proofing process to your author. So if you read a sentence and it doesn't really make sense, you're not gonna go, oh, you know what, I'm only doing P&G, so I'm not really gonna tell them anything. That's not how it works. Like, we have a heart, we have a soul, we have some ethics here at play, and we're gonna let them know. So there are different tasks that you'll grandfather in, I guess we'll say. So clarity is a big one. If it's reading really wooden, so it's the same sentence structure maybe 3 times in a row, for instance, right? But in large part, proofing is the lightest touch. So it is going to maintain the integrity and maintain the content of what the writer has written down. So you're not going to do much with that. You're just going to make sure it's nice and polished. Line editing is the second tier. Line editing is interesting because, in every one of these tiers does encompass proofing. Proofing, that's a new word. Proofing, I will say that. You're always going to give your author or yourself, if you're doing it, the best feedback, the best result, right? So, and that's going to encompass using P&G. So every single time, if I'm doing developmental editing, I'm not just sticking to, storytelling structure and things of that nature. I am making sure when I return the manuscript that it is to the best of my ability. Okay. But back to line editing. So line editing is interesting, and I think you can derive the meaning of it from the phrase itself, line editing or sentence editing. It doesn't overlap into structural, for instance. So you're not going to take a look at the outline and go, this works, this doesn't work, let's move this around and things like that. You're not going to look at those big pieces. That's not what you're doing. You're looking for things like redundancy, word choice, again, clarity. Clarity does come into play there. So, and you're not interrupting the context per se of the content. So the meaning of the content or what the writer is trying to get across, you're not interrupting that. You're upholding it, but you're helping them make different choices. So that really encompasses line editing. And then you have developmental editing. So developmental editing is soup to nuts. It's everything. It's the structure, storytelling strategies, it's word choice, it's could be continuity errors. It's everything that you could possibly encounter in a book. When I am given a developmental editing job, I start with that structure, and you have to start with that structure. Think of that eagle eye view. So if we're looking, from 50,000 feet down, and we want to make sure that everything from that viewpoint makes sense. It's flowing well. So anybody who's reading it is going to go, oh, this is great. Okay, I follow along really well. And that is the goal. The goal in any kind of writing that you're doing is that you can hand it off and the other person is going to read it and go, I totally get this, right? This is where our head needs to be. This is where the goal needs to be. So we have people sometimes, and it can be hard. It can be hard. When I was first starting out writing, I would give all my writing to my mom, and my mom would would read it and she would offer critique, and I was just too fragile at that time, and I really I just couldn't take it. I would say, "Well, you hate it then. You just hate it. You hate everything. It's terrible." That's not the aim of developmental editing. And as an author, you want to make sure that you put on that hat where it's like, this is my critique hat, and I can take critique as long as it has a reason attached to it. So keep that in mind as you're going. The editor that you're working with, this is for the betterment of the work. It might be hard to hear feedback sometimes, but it's always based on this is going to help you improve. So back to developmental editing, the 50,000 foot view. So first of all, we need to make sure we have an outline. And we talked about that before. I need to make sure I have an outline so that I am being strategic and also proactive versus reactive. So we're saying, okay, I want this content to move in this manner. I want to take the reader through this journey. Does it make sense? Yes, it makes sense. Okay, great. Then I know I've got my chapter outline nailed down. Now I can get into the chapter itself. And the chapter itself is like, if it's nonfiction, it might be made up of different sections. So I'm going to look at those sections and go, okay, well, does this make sense? Right? Or do I want to move this piece here and this piece here? Do we want to talk about this first and then do we want to kind of touch on it later? You always want to ensure that you're introducing a concept, a person, whatever it is, you're introducing it first, then you refer to it. So we look for things like that in this stage. We look for a lot of clarity. So is this making sense? Sometimes we'll squeak in some grammar and punctuation as we go. You're not supposed to edit as you write because it'll just plug everything up. It'll plug the flow up. But as an editor, I'm also trying to stick to big picture, but sometimes I'll have a glaring error in front of me and I'll go, man, what if I don't see that again, right? Because every single time you go through a manuscript, you're going to get more and more used to seeing a typo, an error, grammatical error, whatever it is. And your brain will go, hey, we've seen this a number of times. Look, I'm going to do this things for you. I'm going to either insert a word, I'm going to subtract a word or a letter or whatever it happens to be. And so you are less likely to see it again. So if I see it and I go, this is an easy fix, I'm just going to fix this right now. So you might do something like that too. Developmental editing means that every single part of your manuscript is going to be touched, or the author's manuscript is going to be touched if you're doing the work. That's what it means. So they're going to ask you about things like if they have a nonfiction manuscript, they're going to ask you about things like case studies. How am I telling the story? Is this gripping? Where do I put in the call to action or the CTA so that it blends really well? Does it sound too salesy? Is it conversational enough? Is it approachable enough? There's a lot of tone and things like that. If you're doing developmental editing for a novel, for instance, now you're way deep into it. You're into plot points, plausible deniability, which means that we're not trying to just solve a challenge that the character is having just like that, because that doesn't make sense. We have to make sure that it's in some of the most beautiful movies, and of course I'm trying to think of one and it doesn't occur off the top of my head. There's a super old one called Primal Fear where they do a fantastic job of breadcrumbing, right? And so you want to strive for that. You don't want all of a sudden to have it be a super fast solution like, here comes the bad guy and you just happen to have this gun appear out of nowhere. Well, where did it come from? Okay, well, I'm going to say that the character bought the gun 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to weave that in somewhere. No, it's not clever enough, right? And I apologize if that's offensive, but that's what you're going to get also from an editor who cares. They're going to tell you that this is plausible deniability. Your reader is going to read it and they're going to go, actually, this sounds kind of lazy. So we could say plausible deniability. The chances of this happening are slim to none, but we can also say that's lazy writing because we didn't explore other options. We didn't look for really fun ways to solve for things. When we write ourselves into a corner, or the author writes themselves into a corner, when the book takes off, it will write itself. It will wake you up in the middle of the night. Your character is going to go, I am going ham, man, and I'm going to do this. And you'll go, wow, I didn't see that coming. And that is how you know you are writing a fully fleshed character. You are writing a believable story. You're going to also hear different editing tactics, and I will get into that more in another episode because I really want to get down and dirty in that particular episode. Right now, we're just kind of doing a little higher level overview as we get our feet wet again with Write Effing Now and exploring video and all kinds of fun stuff. So those are the differences. Now, you may also, as an editor, do some ghostwriting or partial ghostwriting. I don't lump that into editing per se. That's more of a writing scope, although you will probably be assigned or sign up for editing responsibilities within that scope. So those are services that you can offer. And if you're an author listening, that's the difference. So it's really important to know what you're getting when you contract for it. And a lot of people seem to get confused about it. One of the things I say is you write, I edit, unless we've agreed otherwise. So somebody might put in a note in a comment section for me, and they would say, okay, I have this idea about this particular thing and I want to say this, and I'll go, great. Go ahead and write it. Because you write, I edit. This is your voice. This is what you signed up for. If you want to do something different, that's okay, but that entails a totally different conversation. When you're editing, moving into using online and offline advantages, and again, we're going to go real high level over this, and I'm going to try and keep this to a much more palatable length of time because last time I was like 40 minutes. Let's beat our record here. And I know people lose their concentration after a moment. So I want to make this very easy to listen to, but I also want to respect the fact that, like, you have to go to bed, you have to eat a sandwich, you have to go to the bathroom, whatever it is, you have to go do human stuff, right? Using online and offline programs offer different benefits and drawbacks. In 2026, even, and I'm just going to throw a dart at the wall on this and say it's probably been about 50 years since the word program was invented. Okay. Traditional publishers continue to use the word program local to your computer. So buying it, downloading it, whatever you're doing. But when you look up and if you see a link or a URL, then you know you're in the wrong place and you have to get back to using that local application, that word application. The reason being is that those first drafts are going to have so many changes. They will cripple your manuscript and your editing process if you use an online application. And sometimes if you use Word, Word is designed to take on all of these changes. I mean, I see changes upwards of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 changes, whether it's spacing, grammar, punctuation, word choice, whatever it is, total rewrites, complete deletions and things of that nature, huge additions that are coming in, and Word is like, I got it. But then sometimes like a couple weeks ago, I was working with an author and I said, man, every time we get in here and we edit, we were editing live. So it's another thing that you can do is you can edit live with your author. It's super fun. And you just blast right through the manuscript and they feel really good about it and really supported. But we were editing live. And every time we would review and edit, and then we would decide what to do about it, we'd usually accept it or whatever. Sometimes we wouldn't. Whatever the case is, we had to take an action to either accept or deny the edit or reject the edit, rather. And so the spinning wheel of death was going in Word. And I was like, what the heck is going on? It's going to take me, every time I performed an edit, it took me like 2 minutes to get back until it was accepted and everything else. So, and that was in Word. So I looked up her, I was able to open this review tab under the review tab, there is a reviewing tab. And if you click on it, it'll open on the left-hand side and it's going to list all your edits. And she had over 9,000. It was actually probably like 9,984 or something like that. So I was like, okay, so we got to just sweep through and get rid of some of this. But my point is that if you did this in an online program, no dice. 100% no dice. You can't. You just can't. It's going to freeze you and bog you down much sooner than Word was starting to at 9,000 edits. And you don't want that. These online programs are not designed for long form content. I'm talking about Google. I'm talking about Word OneDrive. That's another one. And people think, well, it's Word. It's got to be the same thing. It actually isn't. It has different functionalities. It was invented at a later date, and I believe, and this is the old kind of garage mechanic that lives in me, that sometimes the things that are older and the things that are proven are superior than kind of newer fangled stuff that's invented for a particular purpose, especially as language is changing. So people aren't speaking as much. They're not just being descriptive as much, things of that nature. And look at text, for instance, if you use a period at the end of a text, people think you're mad at them, right? So language is evolving and look at the different things that we're leaving off in our text. We're not using articles, for example, very fragmented and things like that. Language is supposed to evolve. I'm not going to be this archaic dinosaur and say it's not supposed to evolve because it is supposed to evolve. But in accordance with that, let's take a look at those programs that are designed for the way people talk and the way people work, not necessarily the way that people are writing books. Okay. As a human being, when you write a book, that first draft is going to have many, many, many edits. It's going to have many, many comments. And it's not a mark of saying that you're not good. It is just what happens in a first draft. We are not used to it. We're not used to it because all of our lives, we are pushed to show up and dress for the occasion, put our face on, put our hair on, get appropriate clothing on, and then step out the door. Now, writing is different. Writing is retraining yourself to kind of have like a childlike mindset of, I'm going to show up as I am. And it's scary, but I'm going to get feedback on what I do. I'm going to put myself out there. I know it's imperfect, but I'm eliciting that feedback so I can get better, so I can keep showing up better. But you really have to make sure that you're doing it and you're following through. That's really important. So back to online, offline advantages. One of the other things that's concerning is, for instance, let's say you create a chapter in Google Docs, and you hand it off and you go, okay, well, here's my chapter. And of course, I'm going to say, well, I told you to make it in Word, please. I told you, put it in local Word. And you'll go, oh, shoot, I forgot to do that. And I'll say, okay, well, that's fine. but I still need it in Word. I can't just take it and reformat it. And the reason, unless you sign off on it, but you have to sign off on it and say, I understand that all my content may not come over, all my edits may not come over, all my comments may not come over, because that's what we're dealing with. When we reformat from Google Doc or OneWord Drive, whatever it is, we are not guaranteeing that 100% of the content is coming over. So that's why we don't do it that way. It's a bummer in some cases because you want that collaboration and to be able to work, but there's also such a thing as master control. So whoever has the master file and is working on it, that is the integrity aspect of it. We want to make sure that we're not working on the same thing. So if we're working in a Google Doc, for example, and I look at some content and I go, okay, well, this is going to be my suggestion. I think that we should do this. And you might come back and say, that is what I already changed. And then you may potentially lose what you just added. So it can be a great collaborative tool. An author and I were working in Google Docs on her back cover copy one night, and I could see her in there kind of manipulating and changing the sentences and all of that. And then I would jump in and do my thing, and she'd be like, okay, this is good, or tweak it, whatever. We were both doing that until we got to a point where it was like, okay, we're good. We're good. We were also texting at the same time because it'd be really kind of weird to be like, are you doing this? What do you think? Is it good? So we were texting at the same time. That's a short form document, that probably maxed out at like 200 words, if that. So it was very easy to be nimble and jump in there and do what we needed to do. Um, Taking feedback, we discussed that before. When you're editing, you need to learn how to give feedback. And when you're an author, you need to learn how to get feedback, which is really important. You've got a precious person, whether yourself or whether you're working with somebody who is feeling vulnerable, who is probably not 100% sure about what they've written, who goes back and forth between like, yay, I did it. I got my book done. I'm so excited. I'm going to go to this next phase into then, oh my gosh, I'm going to get feedback. I'm terrified. What if I hear it's awful? So you have to be very careful about that. I strive, and maybe I need to do this a drop more, but I really strive not to be emotional when giving feedback. And the reason being is that's my job to not be emotional. It's my job to be pragmatic. It's my job to look at it and say, okay, for the betterment of this document, like one, I'm not understanding it. Okay, I know you like this word choice, but maybe in this context, it's not working for you. Um, but two, I super love what you did here. This is so great. And I usually try to lead with, I love this. The authors I work with are super serious. They don't want that pat on the back. Everything looks great. You should be super proud of yourself. All of those things. They don't want that. They want the learning. They want to be challenged. They don't want anybody else to do that for them. So I know that. I know they're here for the teaching, the coaching, and so that's really what I try to provide them. But that feedback is really important. First of all, you have to be honest about it. That is just all about integrity. Being honest about something helps people improve, but you have to do it in the right way. And it's not like, well, I'm going to be super careful with you because I know you're really sensitive. It's more like, hey, I know you can take this, but I'm going to deliver it in a very kind way. So we're going to talk about things that are great. We're going to talk about things that you can work on. They're going to talk about things that are great again. That's that sandwich. Some people don't like that sandwich. We call it a critique sandwich in my house, and it's important. Always have to encourage people and gently talk to them. Some people will say, just let me have it. Just tell me you can just rip that band-aid off and just let me have it. And I'll go, that's not how I work. I don't yell. I don't say like, this is up to you. You're the one holding yourself back. Get mad at yourself. You're the one who signed this. Blah, 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 blah. I don't do any of that. I don't do it because it doesn't work. Kind of apply some of my momming to this too. So there's some natural consequences sometimes. Like if you don't do the work, I can't love your book more than you. I can't sit on your lap and move your hands and get you to finish. I can't be your voice and speak it out if you're supposed to dictate and hand in transcriptions. I can't do that. I can't do your revisions for you. Okay. And unless, and you want to hire me, that's a different conversation. But when you're an author, these are the things that you need to be prepared to hear. And as an editor, it is your job to deliver them in a way that's not soul crushing. This isn't like I'm giving feedback on how well a wall was painted in your house. Like, oh, well, you've got some up there near the ceiling, so we're going to need to get in there and redo that, or whatever the case is, right? Or how great your garden looks, It's not that. It's not going to cut you to your very soul. This is you, your soul pouring out your lessons. It's all blended together with you believing that I have something to say that I think people will listen to. That is an incredible responsibility, which is why we need to be very mindful. Do you need an editor if you're trying to publish traditionally? I do get this question from people. It would seem like, well, if I publish traditionally, I know they're going to have a team of people in their back pocket, right? They're going to have the cover designer. They're going to have several editors, and you're going to have like a junior editor. You're going to have marketers that you work with and things of that nature. So then why shouldn't my job then be to sell them on this work? And then they'll swoop in and do their thing with their team. That makes sense, doesn't it? However, they're not going to look at your manuscript unless it is in the best state possible. They want to know that you sat down and that you either hired somebody or you just had this crazy standard. So when it came to them, it was pretty much ready to go. They could change some things around and stuff like that. And you'll find that some traditional publishers and production companies do that. They want the idea and then they're going to put their spin on it. So you'll find that. But you do need to get your foot in the door first. You're not going to get your foot in the door if your book is full of typos, if you don't know how to use tenses correctly and things of that nature. You will not get your book in the door. And that also feeds into creating your cover letter. So your cover letter is super important, and it is a kind of built up brick wall of like a formatting order. So first you'll talk about the work and then you'll talk about maybe similarities to other works that were successful. You're going to want to address the publisher and that agent in particular and talk about why you follow them and think they're so cool and the works that they've represented and how they mean something to you and things of that nature. So I don't want to spend a lot of time there. That is a different episode for a different day. And we are going a little bit more high level here as we jump back into it. But the bottom line is that yes, you do need an editor if you don't know what you're doing. Qualifications of your editor. What a great question. Many times you're going to find that there isn't really a standard editing course or things like that that um, make an editor worth their salt. Let me put it that way. It's a combination of more formal training, yes. It's a combination of passion and having this just of your own volition, you're learning. You're researching. There's a lot of researching and editing because if you just come out and tell me something like, this lighthouse on this shore is 1,780 feet tall, I'm gonna go, okay, I gotta find that out. I can't just take you for your word, even if, unless you were like, I'm the lighthouse maker. I made that. That's my, here's my blueprints, right? Then maybe. But you've got to have an editor who goes that extra mile for you. A little OCD doesn't hurt the situation. If you've got somebody that's a perfectionist or like, I strive to be a relaxed type A, okay? Somebody who's committed to the work, somebody who loves what they're doing. Anytime, I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're putting a pool in your backyard. You want an artisan. You want somebody who's like, I've been doing pools for 10 years and I love it. Experience. There's a lot to do with experience. That should be in your criteria. I think it also helps to have your editor be an author because then your editor can sympathize with you and not just empathize with you. Some of editing is kind of like emotional coaching. So somebody will say, and I've talked about this before, um, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel like I'm a good writer. I read so and so's book and now I have no confidence. There's all kinds of different things that are going to come into play, or somebody's going to go, it reads like this in my head, but then I get it out and it doesn't read like that anymore. And what do I do about it? Because if I keep writing it, it's different. And this is discovering the different tools that they need in the journey. So what they start out with, they might go, "Yep, I think I just want a standard editing contract. This is the way it's going to go. Whatever. I don't want any ghostwriting, stuff like that." Perfect. We'll start there. But if we start to develop difficulties, if they have trouble paying attention, if they have any sort of learning challenge or things like that, that's got to be addressed as well. You can cut some corners when it comes to especially the professional presentation of your manuscript that you're trying to query to a traditional publisher. You can, let's say, your fiance is an English teacher. That is a great choice. Maybe they are just fantastic at proofreading. Maybe they do it all the time. They do it at home and it makes you crazy. They whip out that red pen and you're like, ah! But in this instance, perfect for you. Perfect. I wouldn't say, it's going to be like your mail person or like just the doctor down the road because the doctor might have a lot of knowledge. But I've worked with doctors. I've actually been surprised because going to school for 8, 12 years, whatever it is for their particular specialty, I was like, oh, they're going to teach me some things. They are focused on this specialty over here. And us word nerds, we're over here learning everything that we want to know on our own through our own passion, through our own invigorating reaching out and things of that nature. So those are the different kinds of editing, and we kind of walked a path today from the editing tiers to the process. Well, a little bit of the process is that there's different ways to do it, and I'll just get into this very quickly. I guarantee you we're going to be talking about this more on another show, so I'll just touch on it real quick here. The process typically has been writer writes a manuscript, editor gets the manuscript, goes through the manuscript, does those first drafts, edits. It is heavy, it is bloody, full of red ink and blood and sweat and tears, hands it back to the author. They go through again, do their own refinement and revisions, goes back to the editor for the second round draft edits, and so on until they get to the proofing stage. I make an exception and I will work with an author chapter by chapter when it seems like it might be overwhelming to the author, or it's a nonfiction work typically, and I know that outline is rock solid. It is not going to move in any way. So then we can chunk it out and we can work on various pieces at a time. We don't have to go in chronological order. They can bounce around in there like a crazy cracked out kangaroo and do whatever they want as long as they hit that content, as long as they address it. So that is the thing that we didn't, the last piece we didn't touch on today. Kind of jumped around all over the place, reminiscent of our dog Java, who really does seem to be a living kangaroo, and that's fine. That's the puppy stage. Hopefully, I gave you some good information about the editing tiers, the process, the online and offline advantages, the agreements that you can make with authors, or if you are an author, that you're understanding exactly what you're getting into, if you can edit your own work, etc. That's my goal. That's my goal. I really want to get information out there. When I was starting to edit, I was gulping up so much information because I didn't understand anything about this field at all. And why would the common person understand anything about this field? There's no frame of reference for it. There's not an editing show that like goes in depth into all of these different corrective measures. Nobody would watch it, first of all. I would, I'd watch it. One viewer, that's it. That's me. Maybe you'd watch it. I don't know. Maybe you're nerdy like me. But in any regard, my job in this show is to give you information to help you better yourself and your authors, if that's applicable. So I'm going to wrap it now. I'm sure that wasn't 20 minutes because I really, you know what? We just go. We go for as long as it feels like it's compelling. That is what Danny says, and he is the boss. So we'll wrap it now. Join us next week. Join us. Join me. Okay, next week for another episode of Write Effing Now. By then, we're going to be right into episode 5, just like that. It's crazy how fast it goes. I've enjoyed being your host. I'm happy to answer any questions. Make sure that you follow me on the socials. You'll find me under Bookmark Publishing House or under Hilary Jastram. And I'm always happy to answer questions. I will see you next week. And until then, write on.